So hopefully you can take me seriously after that thumbnail. It's all for the algorithm, right? Anyways, thanks for tuning into the channel, everyone. Today I want to talk about the Canada Line and why, despite what the media says and what many commentators say about the line being an abject failure, why it's truly a line I love and why I think it might be one of the best transit projects ever executed in Canada. So to start off, what is the Canada Line? The Canada Line is a metro, or probably more accurately light metro line, operating in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Now the Canada Line has 16 stations, over 19 kilometers of track, just over half of which of that track is above ground while the other half is below ground. A portion of the Canada Line's tunneled sections were bored using tunnel boring machines, but the majority were done using cut and cover tunneling. This mixture of modes of operation is really important, especially in Toronto, where we have kind of an obsession with either running trains down the middle of a traffic-filled street or running them under the street. We don't really talk about doing elevated transit very much, and while I am super happy that the Ontario Line is changing that conversation, it's still really an important one to have, because a lot of people just can't really visualize what modern elevated transit looks like. They imagine something like the Chicago L that just kind of blocks your view and sits directly above the roadway. Now, the Canada Line actually opened in late 2009, and that's a huge win. Why? That's because the Canada Line actually opened several months early in preparation for the Vancouver 2010 Olympic Games. Now, during the Olympics, the Canada Line carried over 220,000 passengers every single day. That's just a little less than half what Toronto's Line 2 Bloor-Danforth carries every single day. But I should note, the trains on Line 2 Bloor-Danforth are more than 3 times as long as those used on the Canada Line. There's a sort of saying that the Canada Line is underbuilt, but that's not super accurate. Sure, there could be better circulation in a few of the stations, and sure, a few of the areas of the alignment, particularly around Queen Elizabeth Park, could be improved, but on the whole, the Canada Line is actually just right-sized. The stations where there's a lot of traffic are larger, and the stations where there's not a lot of traffic are quite small and minimal. They still provide an adequate experience, and they're totally in line with the quality of subway stations in other cities, just on a smaller scale. The Canada Line has a lot of successes that people would go crazy for in a lot of cities. Things like driving massive transit-oriented development, improvements in travel times, turning YVR into an airport that now has 25% of its passengers coming into it via the train, and many other benefits. The point is, the Canada Line has been a success on basically every metric, despite the fact that before it opened, politicians pushed for it to be downsized from its original scope, which was more akin to the original Vancouver SkyTrain network. Now, even though I'm saying that, I want you to note the Canada Line is not really under capacity or underbuilt. It's been incredibly successful, but we know from the Vancouver 2010 Olympics that with tight operations, it can carry a lot more people. Already, since the line opened, a new fleet of trains has been ordered to expand the original fleet. This means that train frequencies are now more often than every 3 minutes. What's great about having small trains at a very high frequency is that it can provide the same capacity as you could with larger trains, just operating a little less frequently. And of course, since SkyTrain is automated, another thing I think is really smart in modern transit systems, that cost differential between having to pay multiple drivers versus having to not pay more drivers to operate more service and just having to worry about the energy cost is a big reason why the SkyTrain network operates insane frequencies. How often do you see metro systems in North America operating on 3 to 5 minute headways on late nights and weekends? That's pretty typical in Vancouver, but it's really uncommon for most of the rest of the continent. So again, with that larger fleet, the Canada Line now has a capacity of around 7,000 to 8,000 people per direction per hour, but that's far from the Canada Line's total final build-out capacity. Despite what a lot of people seem to think as a rumor, the Canada Line trains can be extended, albeit not a ton. A third 10-meter car can be added to the existing 40-meter trains. These 50-meter trains and higher frequencies that are currently operated can kind of come together to provide a total final build-up capacity on the Canada Line of 15,000 people per direction per hour. Now, I want to compare the Canada Line to a line that a lot of Torontonians will be familiar with, albeit not necessarily for great reasons. The Eglinton Crosstown has been under construction for a really long time, since around 2012 actually. The trains on the crosstown are going to be 90 meters long, the stations are really large, they have multiple entrances and exits generally, and half the line operates at grade, while the other half operates in expensive bored tunnels. Despite all these features, the Eglinton Crosstown's total final build-out capacity is exactly the same as the Canada Line's. The difference is that the Canada Line will provide much higher service quality, because while the larger trains on the Crosstown will probably operate less frequently in off-peak hours, on the Canada Line they're able to match the frequency to demand and provide more frequency than you would otherwise see on a transit system that is manned. In addition, the cost of the Canada Line, even with inflation, was substantially less than the cost of the Crosstown, and construction also took substantially less time. There's a lot of things we need to look at in the Canada Line and see how those successes can be brought over to other systems in Canada. It's largely thought that the Canada Line inspired the construction of the Montreal REM network, who is financed by CDPQ, a pension fund in Quebec, who actually also was involved in the Canada Line project. What's more, to compare the Eglinton Crosstown to the Canada Line is that despite costing more, the Eglinton Crosstown provides quite a bit worse service. The surface sections of the Crosstown operate a lot like a traditional streetcar, with trains not operating much more frequently than every 5 minutes and not receiving significant priority over private cars. One of the reasons I think grade separated transit is so wise, because when you grade separate the transit, you put the politics aside. It doesn't matter what the policy on transit signal priority or anything like that is, the trains can operate frequently no matter what. What's also important to note is that the Canada Line trains are unlikely to be hit by cars or caught in accidents, whereas this is something that's quite likely to affect the Eglinton Crosstown fairly frequently. What's worse is that the Eglinton Crosstown is a really fundamental line to Toronto. I try to emphasize this a lot, but the Eglinton Crosstown is our second east-west line. If you look at Toronto, we have two north-south full subway lines. And while I don't necessarily think that we need to have two full subway lines traveling east-west, it would be nice to see something that's at least fully grade separated on Eglinton, which is why I'm supportive of an elevated Eglinton West extension. Now, of course, I'm more supportive of an underground extension than an at-grade extension, but still, I think that grade separation on the whole is just a smarter decision. In general, it's a little weird to see Toronto basically trying to emulate the streetcar network, but over longer distances. Streetcars are a great tool for transit, but they work really well in dense areas, like Old Toronto where they traditionally operated. That's because streetcars and LRTs have lower average travel speeds, especially when they're operating in mixed traffic. That's because they can't operate faster typically than the traffic speed limit, and they have to wait at lights sometimes. And they're less reliable because, yet again, they can be hit by private cars, something which metros of any kind cannot. Now, I think the ultimate lesson to be learned here is not that LRT is always bad, or that there's not a solution where LRT makes a lot of sense. But I'm really concerned about the way Ontario is literally looking at every transit project, at least until the Ontario line came up, and saying LRT should be the solution to this problem. LRT is an enhanced streetcar, and so it should probably work in the same places streetcars work really well. Something like the Waterloo Ion is a pretty good system because it has a mixed operations on some rail corridors and off of streets a lot of times. And so that makes really good use of light rail's flexibility. The problem is when you're using light rail's flexibility to just put the trains underground, you probably should have just built a metro anyways. That's also because the difference between elevating transit and building it on surface streets is not that big. Now, while the Canada Line does have less stations than, for example, the Eglinton Crosstown, it provides a faster service, and stations are still very walkable from any point along the alignment. In fact, if you were watching the channel this summer, I spent a lot of time walking the Canada Line and other SkyTrain lines, and I can tell you that I could walk almost the entire distance of the Canada Line's tunneled portions in Vancouver in less than 2 hours. So the alignment is very walkable, and accessing stations from places along the route are never more than 10 minutes. Now, the Canada Line did use a few loopholes, so to speak. The Canada Line is a P3, but so are many of the transit projects we're building in Ontario. P3s are super interesting because when transit agencies and governments write good contracts for them, what they essentially do is define an output specification and then let the private sector develop the best solution for that. What that led to in Vancouver is instead of using large LRT trains traveling infrequently, the best way to meet that capacity requirement was to run smaller trains frequently, as is done in many other cities like Copenhagen and Madrid. And this small train operating frequently model is really excellent because what happens when the Canada Line becomes congested? Well, we just build another parallel line, and if we do it like the Canada Line, it will be at a low cost, and then a lot of ridership can be diverted off it, and we have a better metro network. Centralizing all your traffic in a single corridor isn't really good, because what happens when there's a delay is there's no network redundancy. You also have less coverage of your entire metro network, and less people live within the watershed of it, which just makes your network worse overall. So to finish this video off, the Canada Line is by no means a failure. Could a few things be better? Yes, but with what transit project could they not be? Using cut and cover was a really smart approach to quickly construct the line and do it inexpensively, and what it's meant is a transformation of Vancouver's transit network. Using cut and cover and other modern construction methods allowed the line to be built quickly and cheaply, which is something all of our transit projects should aim to do, because the faster we build them, the faster people can ride them. And if we can build one transit project quickly, if we need to relieve the line, we can build another transit project quickly. It's better to approach transit this way than Toronto's approach, which is that we don't believe we're ever going to be able to build another line, so every line we build needs to be as high capacity as possible. At least that's the approach for some lines. For some inexplicable reason, that's not the approach for every line. Finch West, Eglinton. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a better opinion of the Canada Line now. It's really a super successful line. It's driven a lot of positive change in Vancouver. It's driven up the transit modal share. It's made transit trips north and south so much faster. It's redeveloped areas of the city for the better. On the whole, it's just a transformational project, and the fact that it was done for less money than Toronto's Eglinton Crosstown and so quickly is a testament to what we can achieve inside North America when we put our minds to it. Thanks for watching the video, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.